This is Tara speaking.
Hey, Tara, this is Jay Izzo. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you great. Thank you.
Okay, you sound great, too, as well, by the way.
Good. There's a new phone, so yeah.
Well,
I think we'll cook with gas this time.
Well, and I took some safeguards. I'm doing some safeguards. I should have done it before, and I didn't do it. In that, I'm going to record directly into the computer. Plus, I'm also going to go Facebook Live at the same time, so that as I'm doing, because I'm recording through two different mediums, as I'm doing that, they're both probably going to be pretty good. So we're going to do that. So here's what we'll do. I'm going to do the same thing that I did the last time we were together, and that, I'm going to open up the show, and I'll have a little music in the background. By the way, let me test the music out to make sure that's not too loud. So I'm going to just play this. You tell me if it's too loud on your end, okay?
Okay.
Can you hear it at all?
No, I couldn't hear it at all.
Okay, how about now?
No, not yet.
Okay, good. Okay, that's perfect, because
Okay.
not always should you hear it. So the fact that it's on my end is a good thing. Okay, so
okay.
Yeah, so because sometimes what happens is if it bleeds through, then people can hear it and it's real loud and it can be pretty funky. So anyway, so what I'm going to do is we'll get going here, and then I'll do the show like I did. I ask people about their 4 areas of their life and check in with them on that, and then I will introduce you, and then we'll go. So I'm just going to keep you on the line, and you can just listen to me ramble. All right?
I love it. Yeah, no, I was disappointed because we had such a great connection, so I will enjoy listening to you.
Well, this is going to be even better because the connection's even going to be better, and I'm thrilled because everything is being done in-house, and instead of me being somewhere in the middle of Kansas and then shot back to me, and so everything's going to be here. Okay? So we're going to go in 3, 2, 1. Hi, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and it's a special edition of A New Direction because we're on a Friday. We normally do Thursdays. That's normally our day. But we are doing a special edition Friday, which I don't normally do, except we had some technical difficulties. Here I am. I'm called the Internet Doctor, and you can have technical difficulties. The truth is, yes, you can have technical difficulties, and we certainly had them. And so I'm bringing back author, speaker, she's a therapist, a counselor, to just amazing, Tarra Judson Stariell, and she's going to be with us, and she's going to be talking to us about her awesome book, Sanity Lost and Found, A True Story of Brainwashing and Recovery. But before I get to her, I do what I always do, and I don't care even if it's a special edition, I always do this exact same thing, and that is I check in with you to see how are you doing in the 4 areas of your life. I look at 4 areas, right? Because I believe we're 4-part people. We're physical people, we're mental people, we're emotional people, and we're spiritual people. And so I want to ask you right now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing physically? 1 being you're really not very good physically, and 10, you couldn't get any better physically. So where are you at with that scale? Eating right? You getting into the gym? You doing some extra walks? Take care of your heart? Have you cut out a few things maybe you don't need in your diet? And by the way, you can't diet and expect that to be the answer, because it's got to be a lifestyle. Because here's what I know about dieting. You're going to get off a diet because that's what we do, right? It's called a diet because you get to a point and then you don't diet anymore. That we all do it. And then we wonder, why did we gain back the weight? Because you stopped dieting. But if you make a lifestyle change, that's when things can be permanent. So, and by the way, I know you can't do it all at once, so do it in little pieces, right? I talk about baby steps all the time. You want to get into momentum, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, you do it in baby steps, little small increments, because those are achievable. You've heard people say things like, well, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one small piece at a time, right? So you have to do all these things in that type of manner too. So how are you doing physically on a scale 1 to 10? 2, how are you doing mentally? Are you doing things to expand your mind? Are you doing things to to grow both sides of your brain. You know, the right side is the creative side, the left side is the logical side. What are you doing in order to make sure that your brain is expanding and growing and doing? Right? So it could be something as, you know, maybe learning a new instrument, or maybe perhaps what you're doing is you're perhaps maybe trying to learn a new language, or maybe you're working on some sort of math skills. Maybe you're thinking about going back to school. That's, you know, that's a real big thing right now. And what a great way to expand your mind. And by the way, on this scale of 1 to 10, I'm not expecting you to go from a 1 to a 10. I'm expecting you to go from a 3 to a 4 or a 6 to a 7. Because when we try to go from a 1 to 10, then that's when we set ourselves up for failure. So where are you at mentally? And then where are you at emotionally? Right? One of the things you'll hear people talk about emotional quotients or emotional intelligence, and I like to talk about emotional intelligence to a great extent. But the point is, what are you doing emotionally to help yourself? Are you in control of your emotions? Are you practicing how to be better at control of your emotions? What are you doing to make sure that your emotions that you're able to connect with other people in your emotions? Can you read other people's emotions? Do little things get to you? Or are you able to go ahead and be able to pull it back? So I want to check in with yourself emotionally, right? Because the truth of the matter is, the better that you can control your emotions and the better that you can understand other people's emotions, the better person that you're going to be. And you're going to be more successful in whatever you do, whether it's your life or your marriage or your relationships or your career, whatever it may be. That emotional component is extraordinarily important to you to develop over time. Because when I hear people say, well, I can't control my emotions, yes, you can. Your emotions don't control you, you control your emotions. But we have to be very intentional about that process and how we're going to do that. And then finally, on the scale of 1 to 10, where are you at spiritually? And spiritually is just really anything that you connect to outside of yourself. Where do you connect outside yourself? Do you connect to God? Do you connect to nature? You know, how do you connect? Because there's a lot of things in this world we can't explain through science. And our eyes deceive us all the time, and things just happen around us. You know, I often say we put our faith in something, and it's usually in something that we really can't see, but we do put our faith in something, and we believe. We have a belief system that challenges us, and that we go, this is our belief system, and this is how I'm going to believe, and we put faith in that. And, you know, if it is God, you know, how is that relationship going? Have you distanced yourself from it? Have you been able to connect into it? Have you tapped into it? Because those are just important areas. So check in with yourself. I hope you will, because if you do this on a regular basis, it'll help you get to that next level and that next step. And that brings me to our next guest, who I am going to introduce, because she is a person who, in increments, was able to get herself step by step by step. She is just one of the most beautiful people I've ever talked to. And those of you who don't know, there was a behind-the-scenes problem. We had some technical difficulties, and so we actually have done this show once, and we had such beautiful synergy together. Tarra and I did, and there was a fear that perhaps maybe we would lose that synergy. But you know what? I believe that I call her friend, because I feel like I've known the most intimate parts of her. And so I'm going to just do the introduction that our friend Richard Kurtz writes, because I belong to the same publicist as she does. So in some way or another, we're all vulnerable. And far too often, our vulnerability leads to abuse and subjugation when we either give up our personal power or have it taken away from us. Tarra Judson Stariell is with us on the show to talk about the ways in which we can be manipulated and how we can take back our power. A bright and beautiful child. I'm just telling you, this book is amazing. Brought up in an idyllic ranch setting as a young woman, she should have had it all. Instead, Tarra fell prey to a psychopath who consumed more than a decade and a half of her life. Cult is a word we all know, but few will ever have reason to confront in their own lives. A cult is something other families might have to deal with, something that will impact other children, maybe or maybe not. How do we become victims of our own irrationality? What makes us vulnerable to the predators among us? How vulnerable are we? Tarra Judson Stariell not only escaped being a victim, but went on to assist others so that they are not a victim. And so, Tarra Judson Stariell, welcome to A New Direction.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here again. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know what? I am so glad that we're doing this again, because I enjoyed the first time we did this actually so much.
Me too.
And
yeah.
I because I enjoyed the book, but more so than that, getting to talk with you and just how I love people's stories when they overcome, right? But you're just a sweet. You have a sweet heart. You have just a sweet demeanor, and you are so positive. And because I'm going to tell you something. I've been around wounded animals. You and I both have. We've been around them as we're farm kids, and as farm kids, we've been around wounded animals, and we see what that can happen to them. We've seen abused animals and how they sometimes don't recover, or it takes just forever to do that.
Yeah.
And you know what? You have been able to come not only through it, but you have now taking the message to other people and helping them to get through it. And that's cool. And I just want to affirm you for who you are, and just say thank you so much for being that person, and because it says something more about you and your willingness to share with my listeners, but share with the world your story. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'm very touched. Wow. I need to let you know, Jay. Really, thank you from my heart, that I had so much help and was really led to write this book. I felt kind of silly about it and a lot of shame, and then really felt that if my story could help others, then it would be worthwhile exposing, the craziness that I've experienced. And I wouldn't be here without my faith, without the support of the therapist that I used, that loved and cared for me and helped me through back to reality, and my family. I just have been so blessed, and so thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So this book that you wrote, Sanity Lost and Found, a true story of brainwashing and recovery, and it is a true story, by the way.
Yes.
Total true story. But the story, while the story focuses, I'm not going to say it focuses. Well, one part of the story focuses on somewhere around 15 years of your life that just seemed to be lost with Solar, who was I guess he was the head of the particular cult, and
right.
And that you were lost in. But the truth of the matter is, when you read this book, there are a lot of things that built up to that. I mean, there was a lot of damage going on, right?
Right. Yes. That's how we become vulnerable to being controlled by another, or being hijacked in some kind of a belief system that will subjugate our needs or our rights. And certainly as a child, having experienced medical procedures, no one in those days used to tell children, and of course we're scared as little kids, what we're going to do, and we were tricked and coerced, and children weren't really regarded as real people until just recently, and then having been molested and having parents that were just really wounded themselves that they didn't really have time to pay attention. My mother was terribly depressed, and I had a good bond with my father for a while, but then he wasn't happy, had to go do something that wasn't of his choosing. And so when we're neglected like that emotionally, we are very vulnerable, and we will fall prey. It's like every child molester knows. They can sniff out. Predators can sniff out, just like wolves can find the weak and the wounded and the aged. There is something about having not had sufficient emotional needs met that leaves us open to someone preying on our vulnerability.
And
that's what happened to me.
Well, yeah, I know that happened to you, but I also look at this whole thing of I know this all happened to you, but then there's the parental thing. There's a lot of people who go through divorce, whose parents go through divorce when we're younger or when we're
Right.
in the middle and everything like that. But it has effect on the child, right?
Yes.
I'm divorced and remarried, and I know that it took its toll on my son. I know it did, and I know that it was a hard thing for him, and it was a hard thing on his mother and I, but I knew that the situation that we were living was not also going to be a healthy environment for him, and at the same time, and I know they have these effects, and that happened to you too, right? I mean, so talk about those effects of, the estranged parents and that piece.
Right. Well, first of all, I wanted to say that, yes, adversity happens, and we're actually designed to evolve through it. If we ignore the adversity, it's like if I had a sliver in my arm and I kept ignoring it, it could actually fester into blood poisoning, gangrene. It would be silly, but I could actually, through that ignoring of the problem, lose my arm. And so emotional wounds fester within us, and they continue to grow as we grow. And if people don't attend to that, the relationships that we have, if there's not sufficient support, then we will eventually end up being driven by those wounds to try to find, in a dysfunctional way, them being met. So when my father stopped talking to me and said he wouldn't love me, never would forgive me, that was crushing, and I didn't have a good relationship with my mother. And when I had the paranormal events and was told explicitly this message about the future of the world, and somehow I took it upon myself that I had to share that message, and when I failed, no kidding, no one wants to hear some crackpot saying, hey, we've got to, the words were given to me, if humans don't change the way that they're living, life as we know it on the planet, it was said to me, life as you know it on the planet will not continue to be the same. And then I had miracles and really strange events, paranormal events, that I really thought I was losing my mind. And I tried to share that, and it really fell on deaf ears. And so my vulnerability, my angst increased, and this man had all the answers for me. And really, we need to teach people that no one has the answers for us if they're on two legs. We really have answers within us, or people can guide us. But when we feel like we're being rescued, we're probably setting ourselves up to be victimized. So that's kind of what led me into, he had this spiritual enlightenment program and promised me a way to get closer to God and a way to find a manner in which I could transfer this message to others. And I'd studied all these disciplines, all kinds of religions, and had failed mainly because I hadn't worked on myself. So that's how I fell prey.
Yeah. Well, so is this a common? Do you find this to be common? Like when you see other people who fall prey to this, do you see this as kind of a common denominator, that they're all kind of searching, or is there other factors that lead into this?
No, I think we actually have located a God center in the brain. It's in the neocortex, the higher brain, and I think that we're all searching for our roots. I mean, even adopted children look for their biological parents. There's something innately, inherently encoded in us, with genetic material, biological material, and then I just think the essence of who we are. Einstein called it the unified field, that we're all connected and we're all searching that out. And if we don't have a clear sense of our boundaries, our needs, our rights, then someone can subjugate us and move us into a direction that's self-destructive. Anybody who's shame-based, who has been violated or has had their rights neglected or rejected, someone from extreme poverty where there wasn't enough love, a prejudice situation where people decide that one group is better than the other. All of this rejection causes a deep sense of unworthiness and a person not being good enough, where in fact we're all basically the same. And yet when the dominant culture subjugates a person emotionally or actually physically or mentally or spiritually, then we become doubtful of our own worth, and that's where we're again vulnerable to the outside influences of another. And it does happen all the time in marriages, partnerships, in groups, religions. It's kind of the way of human beings to learn how to find truth within, and then to accept that not everybody shares that truth or is going to honor us, and we need to just take a step away from those people who aren't able to respect us.
That's powerful, but is it easier said than done?
Yes, of course.
I mean, because, like, I think one of the things that I concern myself with, and I don't worry about it, but I do concern myself because I concern myself with people who are vulnerable. And I know that when bad things happen to good people, right, and when they do, or bad things happen to anybody, that what happens is, if there's a history of continuous bad things just happening over and over again, and it's not brought on by themselves, right? I mean, like your relationship with your dad. Your dad, was not exactly the person who was going to affirm you, and he also didn't forgive you, early on. And so those are bad things that happened that you didn't ask for.
No, but Jay, I think that there is no blame that is really going to be helpful. I mean, people are responsible for what they do, but we're all products of our histories and our unconsciousness. Those behaviors that have been done to us that hurt us will drive the spectrum of emotions that are self-destructive, anger, fear, and shame. And so we go to a place in our brains where we're truly out of our right minds because we're not relating in the here and now. We're being driven by history, by belief systems. That's what drives people to go into cults, is that they don't live in the here and now. They're still being directed by their unprocessed emotions. And so things will continue to be unconsciously drawn to us until we work through the original wound. And if you can take a step back from that, it's really movement towards balance, like all the planets stay on their axis. Gravity doesn't make exceptions. It doesn't matter who you are, how much money you have. Gravity's not listening to that. So that's the inherent balance, and that's nature, and we're not exempt from it. We kind of think we're special and that we are, but we're moving towards balance too, and emotional balance is so necessary. So if it takes, I think we get the little tap on the shoulder, maybe the whisper in the ear first, a little tap on the shoulder, and then maybe a rap on the back, and then, if we wait till the 2x4 or the freight train version, it's really wake-up time, and that's what it took me. I did the freight train version. So I wrote that book in hopes that people will slow down and pause and reflect on what they're doing, who they're giving their personal power and time and energy to, and to what, and does it serve them, or is it involved in the shame, blame, rage, judgment game. So.
And by the way, we're talking to Tarra Judson Stariell. She's the author of the book Sanity Lost and Found, a true story of brainwashing and recovery. And you can get it Kindle, paperback. Go to your bookstore, ask them if they don't have it on the shelf. It's available. It's just a fabulous, fabulous read. I got so engrossed into your life. I felt like I was living your life with you, and it was I was getting mad at times.
Yes.
I was getting because
that's important, because we want to be we want to be mad and make that other person wrong.
Well, yeah. Well, not only was I angry that they were wrong, I wanted to do something about it. I mean, there was a part of me when we first talked. There was a part of me that literally was shaking with anger because I was like, okay, if she's not going to be able to take vengeance for her, then I'm going to, because I'm gonna have to open up a big old can of good old country whoopings, and I'm gonna have to handle this, because it just made me angry. And
Yeah.
I don't know how that translated to you. Did you experience the anger? I mean, were you experiencing anger after? Did you get that?
No, with you, no. I take it as empathy. I mean, because as I exposed in my book, I went through a time of raging. I didn't know that it was rage, but I was filled with hatred. And there isn't one of us who hasn't been unjustly treated, and that pokes at that. But I think that, like Gandhi said, an eye for an eye and the whole world will be blind. There needs to be a better way for us to deal with the injustices, or, we just are going to perpetuate beating up one another emotionally, physically, or otherwise. And so, yes, what was done was so unfair, so heinous, so hideous, and yet the necessary part that is important to recognize is that I put myself there, whether it was consciously or unconsciously. Sometimes I consciously went back into the bowels of hell, thinking that mission was more important than my well-being, and that's what we do. We sacrifice ourselves, and people hurt themselves because they hate what's been done to their body if they've, say, been raped or abused, not recognizing that they're not in their right minds. They're not relating to the here and now reality. And I couldn't do that because I was so locked into this belief that I had to do that. And once I was out of it, I hated him. I wanted to kill the guy. And that behavior directed me, to doing some silly things that I wrote about. And then I started, through the wisdom of others, recognizing that, well, wait a minute, being filled with hatred is just like eating poison, expecting the other to die. And I started studying, a spiritual path called The Course in Miracles, about teaching about forgiveness. And I found out I had to go through the emotions first, but how empowering it was to not let what this man had done to me control me in my life, in my emotions, in my physical being. And I tell you, that was amazing. And so I think that's really an act of courage that we need to entertain and look at. Not always easy, but it's certainly worthwhile.
That's beautiful. We're talking with Tarra Judson Stariell here on A New Direction. And she also, if you go to the centerforselfdiscovery.com, you will be able to see a picture of the lovely and talented Tarra, and she's right there, and she is a marriage and family therapist and licensed in the state of California, of course, and she's a somatic therapist as well. And her clientele includes adolescents, individuals, couples, and families. And I got to ask you a question about this whole cult thing, because is there a progression, and when I mean that is okay, I know you're vulnerable. So you're vulnerable and you're looking and you're searching and you're trying to find something that you can kind of relate to, or that can fill your soul or fill you mentally and emotionally and maybe even physically. And I know that it kind of starts there, but then does the abuse have a progression? First it's like maybe it's emotional, and then it moves to mental, and then it moves to spiritual, and then finally it moves to physical. Is there a common progression?
Yes, there are actually. Some great books have been written about the steps that people take. This guy had a master's degree in criminal psychology, so he's well versed in how to break people down. And so the first step is to gain their confidence, good cop, bad cop type of thing. And, all of us were looking for something. We were looking for a way to make the world a better place. So we had these pure intentions, but we'd all been very wounded and betrayed by someone that was important to us. And so that was our vulnerability, that we needed that chink healed. And so he, encouraged us to purge from those places and, tell me, and he was uniquely comforting to me. I had shared with him some of the crazy things that happened. Oh, yeah, I understand. Well, that was unique. And so now I'm taking a step closer to him And then he said, well, in order to get through all this pain and suffering that you've had, you really need to step away from all that, and we're going to call that your past. And so he started isolating me from my familiars, from my family, and he said, you're going to be in this non-interactive program. Well, I had read about the Tibetan monks and people who'd gone into seclusion and were in, retreats and were not interacting with society to get closer to God. Well, so that seemed logical. And then he started control. And then he's, well, did you think of those people? Remember, you're to leave them behind. And so the past became this onerous thing that I was shamed for and criticized for thinking of. And I had a dear relationship with my grandmother, who becomes, an amazing champion for me later on, and my family. And so I couldn't, you say don't think of pink elephants, and that's the very first thing you think of. The brain starts playing tricks on us, and so I couldn't not think about them. And so I was criticized and shamed and then told what a failure I was. I'd already felt like a failure, so he exacerbated the wound, poured salt into it. So now I'm even more desperate, but I still have this notion that he keeps reminding me, well, I can give you the answers, and you wanted to do this, well, I can help you. I am the unique individual who can do that. And so I kept buying more into, taking another sip of the Kool-Aid, that this was where I needed to go. So as he started controlling everything that I ate, and I started to lose weight, and he said, well, you wanted to lose weight, didn't you? So then I was deprived of food, and so your brain goes into this strange place where you're really not in your executive functioning part, you're in survival. So I was a vegetarian at the time, and he started, giving me food that I wasn't used to eating, and I was starving, so I started eating that, and then it just insidiously took over, threw away all my possessions, everything that I had used to identify myself, how I had defined myself was being taken away. So this non-interaction with familiars left me incredibly vulnerable to his impressions. The notion that I still held that I had to do this, my life worth depended on it, that I was going to be lovable if I did this. And then as he encroached on my boundaries, and even though I said, that's not right, I want to keep these things. Nope, they're part of your past, they're part of what's brought you here. Well, there was a little bit of logic in that, but there was a lot of inside information that my body and my heart, my mind were trying to give me, but I overruled those, as human beings can do, and I said, no, this is more important. And so pretty soon he was controlling every aspect of my life. And then he started creating these standards that I couldn't fulfill. Well, then I was really wrong, and I started taking it out on myself. And then he moved into physically hurting me, and all of us. That's how he did it with all of us. And then pretty soon, you're gone. You're just a walking robot. When someone's battering you, you never know when you're going to be safe. You do what we call is a trauma bond. People can look up the Stockholm Syndrome, and that actually we have a documentation of what happened. Or Patty Hearst, when she was abducted, held captive in a closet and then raped. She became a bank robber along with the Symbionese Liberation Army. They were a bunch of terrorists that had kidnapped her, and she joined them. And actually, when she got jailed, that's why she's still among our culture now. She got out, but they tested her. The Hearst family has lots of money, and they started sending in psychologists to help rehabilitate her. Well, she tested really low on her IQ, even though she was a very brilliant woman. Right. And that's because we go to this, dumber place, if you will, this survival-oriented place in our brains, and we're not thinking rationally. We're just thinking about survival. And so that's where I was. That's where we were. And he drove us into that place. And, of course, I willingly walked into that thinking that this was what I needed to do in order to be redeemed, in order to be loved, in order to do that mission and come closer to God. So that's how that happens, is we keep giving up control, allowing someone to squash our boundaries, bump them, and then railroad over them. And pretty soon we're subjugated. We're very dominated.
We're
like the Jew. Oh, excuse me.
No, we're talking to Tarra Judson Stariell, author of the book Sanity Lost and Found, a true story of brainwashing and recovery. I am fascinated. I did some work in the criminal end of psychology, forensic psychology, for a little while, and I'm fascinated by the human mind, and I'm fascinated how we are able to allow ourselves to do the things that we do, regardless of what it is. One of the things I think that is confusing to many members of the audience, I think confusing to a lot of people, and because we'll sometimes see something on TV, and so I'm curious from your perspective, is why do people just want to continually, they're getting physically abused. Why don't they just get out? I hear people say that all the time. Why, from your perspective, why don't they just get out?
Right. It is a fascinating phenomenon that human beings do. We call it a trauma bond, and we're so survival-oriented, we will bond with our perpetrators in order to stay alive. But again, we're in that less intelligent place of our brain, which is all about survival and not about rational thinking. Rational thinking happens in a different part of our brain when we're safe. And so when we're all about survival, if how to survive is to make friends with the enemy, we're there. And that's why people stay. And then the other underlying reason is when we're vulnerable, it's because we don't have a sufficient full cup emotionally. So a sufficiently full cup emotionally. And what that means is that our developmental needs were not met, or we were neglected or abused, or any or all of the above. Emotional neglect is just as pervasively disabling as, physical being wonked on, being hurt and battered as a child. But trauma is what debilitates us. And so anytime our needs or our rights are violated or neglected, that causes trauma. And over time, trauma puts us into that place where we're so needy that some contact is better than no contact, because human beings are hardwired for connection. So someone will stay in a battering situation because they're in survival mode, and we need contact. And so even though they're getting beaten, there will be, that battering stage, and then a honeymoon stage, and then the tension building stage. The honeymoon stage is enough. It's like gambling, intermittent reinforcement. Oh, the machine paid me off. Well, so what? I've lost $2,000. This time I know it's really going to pay hugely. I just keep putting in more money, and that's what people do when they're in that hamster wheel of shame, fear, or anger-generated, driven behavior. We're not in our right minds. We're totally trying to survive, and we're not thinking about the outcome. We're just thinking about staying alive and having some kind of contact. So that's why people stay, is because we need connection.
And I get that, and I get that we do, and I can certainly see that. And the Stockholm Syndrome, which is we talk about that in Introduction to Psychology, because it's one of those fun things to kind of talk about as an intro class. But I think I don't think people really grasp just how, because people, we want to believe that we're the exception to the rule, right? I mean, we want to believe that, oh no, we don't conform, or there's no way they could make us do, no way can make me do that, right? And yet what you portray in this book is, hold it here, you were a farm girl, okay? You were a farm kid. You came from a pretty tough, rigorous lifestyle. I mean, as a farm guy, I'm just saying that we had to do things that most people would not do, nor would they stand the smell of. Right. On the basis.
Yeah, it's
raw
life.
Yeah, it's raw life, and we're taught from a pretty early age how to work on our own.
Right.
That you're left alone, you just need to get the job done, and so we have this pretty independent spirit. And yet here you are, somebody who has been well trained, and it's well documented that you had this whole individualistic viewpoint, and yet you succumb to it. And I constantly say, Tarra, to people, don't think for an instant that you're not, or you cannot be vulnerable. to this. There's a danger in that, don't you think? When we're so confident?
Yes, because we're not looking at the warning signs. We're not asking ourselves, we're so distracted in this culture that we don't realize it, and that's the insidious part of being taken advantage of, losing your rights, giving up your autonomy. It just becomes normalized. Lemmings don't stop and ask themselves, why are we rushing off the cliff? They just do it. And they join in because they have this shared common bond. Well, Maslow decided that we need safety first, and we need to belong. So if the group you belong to is doing something that you don't like, your safety is at risk. And so if that's really an important deal, then you override that. And George Orwell wrote about that, and we're seeing a lot of that in the world now, where the Germans exterminated Germans. They didn't ask, well, are you okay with this? They thought they were doing the Jewish people and everybody else they obliterated a favor. Why? Because they decided that the people who held the money and who were different were their problem. They didn't question it. You see, they had this higher idea. Well, they were starving. I mean, it was a real time of need. And they bought into that, slavery, all this subjugation. When the people went all throughout South America, they thought they were God's chosen and they had the right to do this. I mean, we trick ourselves constantly that we have the right to destroy or take over another's rights, and we forget that we don't have that right, and that's because we don't recognize how vulnerable we are to our misguided misperceptions. And I think it's really important to give ourselves time to pause and reflect and ask, is this serving me? Is this serving the greater good? Because if it serves me, it serves the greater good. We're all connected.
It's beautiful. Talking to Tarra Judson Stariell, author of the book Sanity Lost and Found, A True Story of Brainwashing and Recovery. She also is a therapist at the Center for Self-Discovery. You can go to check more about what she does and how she does it. You can go to the centerforselfdiscovery.com, and she's available, and she is so candid and honest. This book is simply one of those books that you will get lost in because there are so many different characters in this book, from your dad to your brother Bruce to the first marriage, and going over to South America, and you were doing what you thought was the greatest thing in the world, and your grandmother, who lives to 106, by the way, in the book, which is just a fast almost
4 months shy of it,
of 106, and then getting lost in this cult with Solar. I don't want to make fun of this, okay, because I certainly don't. But there was a part of me that goes, okay, when you want to call yourself Solar, that should be an orange flag at least that says, I probably don't want to be involved with somebody like that, right? I mean,
right. But you aren't desperate.
But you're
Jay,
right.
You weren't desperate. I was.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that desperation, right? Does things right. What did Skinner? One of the things Skinner found, right, is you deprive an animal of something, and you can get that animal to do pretty much anything.
Yes.
And I mean, he demonstrated it, whether it was in pigeons or rats or whatever. He was demonstrating that deprivation is absolutely critical to behavior change.
Right.
If you do that. And I know that people don't like to hear that because they think it's manipulative and that type of thing, but it happens all the time. We're being deprived of something. It literally does, and that's why we sometimes fall into bad things. One of the things that, though, intrigued me was this after story. So I wanted us to get there because we're going to talk about my favorite thing about this book. But what were the steps to getting out for you of the cult?
Well, remember, he isolated us, and so as I started hearing, we were traveling all around, we were spiritual vagabonds, I started having interaction with others, and people were courageous enough to let me know that I could serve God without being subjugated by this man or abused. I mean, it became obvious to some that that's what was happening. And that was like a little drop in this, dry, arid bucket I had And so eventually, as each drop was, placed in, I started, or like putting the borders, around a puzzle, it started giving me a framework of, you mean there is a different way. You mean that's possible. And so it started filling in the self-doubt with questioning what I was doing. And then I credit my cousin Donna, because that's why she's in the dedication, is she not only taught me about forgiveness, but she also taught me, at one point we're broken down and we don't have any money, and we're right outside of Yosemite, and we have the car just is totally gone, and so we have our possessions in a garbage sack, and I'm instructed to call my cousin, and I'm pleading with her to come drive, a day and a half to come get us, and I said, and she said, why should I do this? Because a bunch of reasons. You have to read the book to find out, and you'll wonder why she came. But I pleaded with her. I said, you don't understand. I'm doing God's work, and she said, well, my God is a God of love, and that was a pivotal moment for me. It's like the earth stopped revolving, because I paused, and it sunk in beyond the brainwashing, and it was like, oh. And that seed eventually grew as more and more people nurtured that awareness that God is love. This is not right. And then I traveled around the country with him again several times, and eventually got my own sign, because I started praying constantly to be released from this, quote, mission. And when I had my own sign, which was a miracle, then I knew I was free to go, and then I started accessing the support and went to therapy the first time in my life. That was a really good thing, and started learning about what should have happened when I was growing up, and what helps, and repairing that. So I got corrective emotional experiences. That's what we call it.
Yeah, there's a something that I don't know why it's calling to me in the depths of my heart, and it's the word called shame.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's just my journey of shame and recovery from it.
Because I think shame is so powerful. Because I think the root of shame is fear, right? I mean, the ultimate root. I mean, like, you don't divulge. We will. What is it? There's a difference between vulnerability and divulging. Okay. We pick and choose what we want to divulge. If we're truly vulnerable, we're a glass-covered book.
We have no boundaries, right?
Right. And shame is one of those things that I think inhibits us from coming clean.
Yeah, shame. You're as healthy as your secrets, and shame is this inherent belief.
Beautiful.
It's a false
You're
belief.
As healthy as your secrets. I love that.
That we're unworthy. Shame drives in this deeply encoded neurological message, I'm unworthy. And that's why people kill themselves, is because deep at their core they're shame-based. That fuels all addiction, all self-destructive behavior, because on top of the truth of who we are, that we're love, is this rejection, this hurt, this abuse, and that's called shame, because we feel this happened to us because we're unworthy, especially as children. They blame themselves for everything negative that happens until that's healed. But see, it can be healed.
Right. But it's just, I just find shame to be such a brutal part of us.
It's toxic.
It is so toxic, and it just inhibits us from so much freedom. Shame just inhibits us from freedom. It just, and I know that your freedom was different, because you're caught in this cult, and I know that you just thought this was what you're supposed to do, because you were desperate and you were vulnerable.
Yep.
And you had all those pieces, and we had this buildup of family rejection and everything else that happened along the way to make this happen. But then one of the things I love about you so much, and it is so powerful. And I'm going to tell you what happened after our first conversation. And I just
okay.
Because this is a neat story, and it was typical of what happens. So you talk about the power of forgiveness, and so and we had talked, and it resonates with me so much because I believe that we need to forgive, and I believe that it's so important. And I said, one of the most powerful things I said is that we need to forgive. Forgiveness is important, and I had literally, Tarra, friends who said, "No way, not you do something against my family, you're never being forgiven." No way. We've got people, and I couldn't believe the number of people who didn't buy into this idea of forgiveness because they felt like, well, at some level, you can't deal this, and you just can't forgive people. You can't. And I'm like going, but you don't understand. If you don't forgive, they're still hurting you.
Yeah.
They're still hurting you. This isn't. I'm not asking you to get into the car with them.
Exactly.
I'm asking you to let it go. But people are resistant to this idea of forgiving people who've hurt you. Talk about that.
Well, when we're hurt, we're in that part of the brain that's angry because we have a neurological reaction to being hurt. And it's a motivating energy to, fight, flight. And it protests the hurt, or it moves us away from danger. And if we still perceive that someone has hurt us, the anger is still being kindled. We're still fanning the fire. And if we recognize that people may have offended us, and they're out of their right minds when they do that, and if we continue to feel angry, we are still allowing that hurt to be there, and it's really not a hurt that hurts my being. It hurt my personality. It hurt my physical body. But if you can look at what Nietzsche used to say, he's deceased now, but your worst enemies are your greatest teachers. If we can learn, well, what did that, crappy thing that happened to me teach me about myself? If we look at resilience and find strength within us, in spite of what that person did, we've now taken back our power, and we recognize that in a very ironic way, they have served us. It's really weird. And most people don't like it because we'd much rather blame someone and shame them for their bad behavior, but it keeps us locked in to, the Kabbalah says that you tag yourself with them. It's, what goes around comes around. So if you hate someone for what they've done, that kind of stuff is going to come back. So much better to step out of the way and let them deal with what they've done. Don't get in the car with them, like you said. You don't have to condone their behavior, but learn how our own vulnerability set us up to be victimized by them. Then we're stronger, we're smarter, and much wiser. So they served us.
And don't they? Here's the thing. I believe firmly about forgiveness, and I agree with you every single thing that you said. And but the strength part, it requires far. I believe the stronger person is the one who can forgive, not the one who wants vengeance.
Exactly.
Right? And because vengeance is easy. Okay.
It's automatic, yeah.
Yeah, because it's kind of our default mode.
Yes.
When somebody does something against us or family, whatever, our default mode is I'm gonna get them back. I'm gonna take vengeance on them.
I'm gonna get them. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And to be able to say, I got to forgive them, right? Or I got to forgive me. How about that one?
That's ultimately where it starts.
Right? I got to forgive myself, right? Because that's not always easy to do. When, for some of us who look back on our past life and we go, man, I did some just terribly horrible things and I treated people awfully, and I try to make amends and hopefully I have to those people and that, but all of a sudden you relive those moments, right? Where you go, God,
Right.
why did I do that, right?
Because we didn't know any better. Like Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better.
Right. Right.
It says so well.
Yeah, and yet forgiving ourselves can be one of the hardest things to do.
But it's so important.
It is
yes.
it's so critical, right? I mean,
yes.
I tell people, people who are watching the show and listening to the show, it's critical for you to forgive yourself. It just is. And then you got to forgive those people who hurt you, because they're still hurting you if you don't.
Yeah, and they're ignorant, or they wouldn't have done that. And so, you really hope that they wise up and get smarter.
Yeah. So, Tarra, we have just a few minutes left. So, first of all, I want to thank you. I've enjoyed this again, by the way.
Me too. Thank you. It's been great. What an honor. Thank you.
I've enjoyed this, and I've enjoyed this, and I love the conversation. It just flows so much easier, and I think it's because we've kind of added an hour to know each other prior.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's been a little easier, I think, for me. But
and me too. Thank you.
But you're an amazing woman. You're an amazing person.
Well, you are too. Remember, if you've spotted it, you've got it.
That's funny.
Thank you.
But you really are, and I love the book. The book, again, is entitled Sanity Lost and Found, A True Story of Brainwashing and Recovery. It's available Kindle. It's available paperback. Find it anywhere you get it. Certainly you can get it at Amazon, but just ask for it. It can be found. It has an ISBN number, so you can find it, folks. Do it. And by the way, folks, this is a true story, and there is no holds bar here, because I'm just telling you. She is telling it as it is and as it happened, and it's gonna challenge every one of your emotions. It's even going to make you laugh at times. It's going to make you cry. It's going to hit every part of it. But I believe that every person will be able to relate to this book on some level. You have either been abused and didn't realize you were being abused, or you have been an abuser. And you just didn't know any better, and you didn't realize that what you were doing is you were manipulating people for your own benefit. And so I don't care who you are. This book is for you, and I'm telling you, you're going to get so engrossed and lost in the book from beginning to end. It's just a beautiful story and a beautiful ending. So, Tarra, before I let you go, and because the show is entitled A New Direction, give us a final thought on a new direction that people can take from you, that you would like to share with the world right now on A New Direction?
Wow. Well, I would say that all of us have this amazing truth and self within us, and if we just paused and were curious, we would be amazed at how beautiful we are at our core and our essence, no matter what we've done, no matter what we are not liking ourselves for. If we just slow down and listen, there's this amazing, amazing being in each and every one of us. And if we took the time to do that, we would weep with joy, because that's, I believe, who we truly are deep down inside.
That is beautiful. Tarra?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jay, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm glad we got to do this.
Me too. Thank you.
And it sounds really good. I know it does, because I'm watching the meters in front of me. so I'm watching the meters, and I was. You don't know the studio, but this is going on Facebook Live on my channel called A New Direction. You don't know this, but my camera, there's a live camera on me, and it started like there was a spiritual thing happening where it would zoom in on my face and then go wide, and then zoom in my face and go wide. So
how sweet.
So people were looking at me going, I don't know what's going on with your camera, and I just said, you know what, just whatever. There's something weird happening, but it's okay, because the sound was good. And so we had a bunch of people joining us on Facebook. So I want to thank them for joining us on Facebook Live today. And of course, you're going to be able to hear this podcast with Tarra and I on iTunes and Stitcher and Spotify and TuneIn Radio. And any place that does podcasts, you're going to be able to find this podcast later. And as I tell folks all the time, you know what? Share it. This show is not meant just for you. I mean, I do want it to be for you, but it's also meant for you to share. Because we all know someone who is going through something, and somebody like Tarra has so much wisdom and so much guidance, and her book can be a help, and this show can be a help to you. So please do that. Be inspired. Tarra Judson Stariell, you are awesome, and thank you.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure and a delight and an honor, Jay. Thank you so much.
All right.
And you are too.
Thank you so much, and I will talk with you soon. I got a feeling we're going to be talking together soon.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So that was Tarra Judson Stariell. This is the end of the show. I want to thank you all for being with me today. You're awesome. I want you to be inspired, because when you're inspired, that means that you'll inspire somebody else. So inspire somebody. Be inspired. I'll talk to you soon. Find your new direction.